What if I told you that behind the popular Sony brand lies a history where its own employees hated it, hackers mocked it in front of the whole world, and some of Sony's decisions literally destroyed people? Today, you will find out how Sony secretly installed viruses on people's computers, why the PlayStation Network became one of the largest data breaches in history, and how Sony tried to control everything you buy, and why many consider the company one of the most toxic corporations in the industry. After this video, you'll look at the Sony brand completely different. Thank you for watching, subscribe, and let's go! In 2005, Sony sparked one of the craziest scandals in the history of technology. The company was releasing music CDs, but something special was hidden inside of those discs. When a person inserted the disc into their computer, they secretly installed software without the user's permission. And that wasn't even the worst part. This program worked like a real virus. It hid deep within the system, and it was almost impossible to delete it. If you tried to remove it, you might break your computer. Security specialists were in shock. Sony was literally using technology similar to hackers' methods and all of that just to prevent people from copying music. The scandal became so loud that the company faced massive lawsuits. For the first time, users realized that Sony would go any lengths against its own clients for the sake of control. In 2011, something happened that permanently damaged Sony's reputation. The Sony PlayStation Network was hacked. Hackers gained access to the information of approximately 77 million accounts, including names, passwords, and user data. The internet literally exploded. But Sony didn't immediately tell people about the breach. For several days, users didn't even understand how bad everything was. Meanwhile, the PlayStation Network was down for almost a month. People couldn't play online, couldn't buy games, and couldn't use the service they had paid for. For Sony, this was a true catastrophe. The company lost billions of dollars, but most importantly, users' trust began to shatter. Sony always loved control, especially when it came to PlayStation. The company literally declared war on people who tried to modify their devices. The most famous story involved a hacker named GeoHot. He managed to jailbreak the PlayStation's 3 protection, and Sony was furious. Instead of just fixing the vulnerability, the company sued him. Sony tried to gain access to his accounts, data, and online activity. To many, this looked like actual bullying, but the problem ran deeper. People bought the console with their own money, but Sony was efficiently saying, you don't have the right to do whatever you want with it. It was then that many began calling Sony out one of the greediest company in the gaming industry. So, in early 2000s, the Sony PlayStation 2 was so popular that the company became overly confident. When they released the PlayStation 3, management literally decided that people would buy it at any price. The price of that console was shocking, $599 in the 2000s. The internet exploded with memes, but what followed was even worse. Sony made the architecture of PlayStation 3 so complex that developers hated making games for it. Some studios spent months just on optimization. Many games ran better on the Xbox, even though the PlayStation was considered more powerful. And it was this aggressive stance from Sony that almost destroyed PlayStation. Imagine buying a device, paying the price, and then a certain update simply deletes part of its features. This is exactly what Sony did to the PlayStation 3. Early versions of the console allowed users to install Linux. This was a unique feature for which many bought a PlayStation 4. Work and experimentation, but then Sony simply released an update and removed this capability. People were furious because, in essence, Sony changed the product after it had been purchased. This became one of the triggers for a massive conflict with hackers and modders. Do you think the major 2011 hack changed anything regarding security? That's what people thought too. Meanwhile, in 2014, Sony Pictures Entertainment was hacked once again. This wasn't just a simple data leak. Personal emails of employees, salaries, unreleased movies, and thousands of internal documentation leaked onto the web. The whole world was reading the correspondence of Sony executive like a Netflix series. Some of the emails looked so toxic and demanding that the company's reputation took a colossal hit. But what was the craziest moment? Out of fear of threats, Sony eventually temporarily cancelled the theatrical release of a movie. The internet then began mocking the company for its weakness and panic. This was a moment when Sony didn't look like a giant corporation, but like a company that had significantly lost control. Sony is frequently accused of trying to squeeze every last dollar out of its users, especially in the PlayStation era exclusiveness. Closed ecosystem, high prices, for years the company resisted cross platform play. In other words, Sony didn't want PlayStation players playing together with people on Xbox or PC. Why? Because the company was afraid of losing control over its users. Even game developers were unhappy, but Sony kept pushing its stance. Many believe that it was the very success of PlayStation that made the company arrogant. Once upon a time, Sony was considered a symbol of innovation. Walkmans, consoles, cameras. Today, however, many feel that the company has lost the exact magic. Sony has become caution. It rarely takes risks, rarely does anything crazy. And instead of a revolution, it often releases safe products. But the internet remembers a different Sony, the company that changed the industry. Perhaps that is why people criticize Sony so harshly now, because people always expect more from a legend. Sony is a strange company. On one hand, it is a tech legend, on the other, it is a corporation that installed hidden software, lost the data of millions of users, sued its own fans, and tried to control literally everything. But the most interesting part is that despite all of this, people still continue to love Sony. Why? Because great brands know how to do most important thing, evoke emotions. This means Sony's story is not over yet, and it's not over yet for me as well. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Are you surprised by some of these facts, or did you know them? Thank you, and see you soon.